All right, Tanya Summary Shiur, week 31, Kanai. We're doing chapters 7b, second half of chapter 7, and chapter 8. Without any further ado, let's get right into it. In the beginning of chapter 7, we explained how there's a difference between the way that we function and the way that Hashem functions. That is to say, that when we have thoughts, when we have ideals, when we have desires, whatever it may be, it's something which is in a way distinct from us. When we relate to something else, that relation is something which is distinct from us, that there's us and there's a thing, and then we relate to that thing. That thing is still separate, and thereby our relation to that thing is also distinct from the essence of our being. But by Hashem, it's not the case. By Hashem, everything that He created is all a part of Him, and thereby His relationship with everything is all an essential part of Him. It's part of His essence. So, with this in mind, the Alter Rebbe says, now I can explain to you the mistake of the people, that Hashem should atone for them, that they unfortunately misread what the Arizal wrote, when the Arizal wrote, or when the students wrote in his name, that Tzimtzum HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Hashem retracted His light. That is to say, that some people were mistaken, unfortunately, in thinking that Hashem Pasha got up and left the land, and that Hashem made an earth and is completely not invested in His universe. So the Alter Rebbe says, I'd like to completely push off this notion, and the Alter Rebbe says we now have the tools that I'm able to do them. So it says the Alter Rebbe that Tzimtzum is the concept of being able to leave something, the concept of being able to distance yourself from something is, as he puts it, Me'eres HaGuf. It's something that happens to the body. As in, the body exists in relation to something else, and then you can distance yourself because space has its own dimensions. You can distance the amount of space between yourself and the other thing, and thereby you are distanced from it. Vis-a-vis Hashem, to say that there is a change in the body of Hashem, as it were, to say that there's a body to Hashem, it gets yourself into too many problems to start saying that Hashem distanced Himself from the earth. Hashem isn't a physical thing to be able to change. Hashem is unchanging. And Hashem is always connected to everything in the world because He knows everything in its complete essence. Nothing is ever devoid of His knowledge. It's never devoid of His being related to it. So to say that Hashem distanced Himself, to say that there's now a null space where Hashem isn't invested, it goes against our understanding of what Hashem is, that Hashem has a perfect knowledge of everything. Even though that the way that His thoughts function are not similar to the way that our thoughts function, in that our thoughts are something which aren't part of our essence. But by Hashem, everything is Him. All of His knowledge is part of Him. It doesn't add anything to Him, but it's all there. If Hashem knows everything, then Hashem is invested with everything. Hashem has a relationship with everything, and that relationship is part of His essence. It's unchanging. Hashem can never drop His knowledge of everything in the universe because everything in the universe is part of Him. And His knowledge is Him. It's a cycle that you can't really get out of when you think about it, to say that there's any room to say that Chas v'Shalom Hashem abandoned any part of the earth, any part of the universe. So says the Alter Rebbe, you might be wondering at this point, okay, well then what does it mean that Arizal did write about it, Tzimtzum? What does it mean that Hashem retracted Himself for the creation of the universe? So to that says the Alter Rebbe, very simple. It's very simple once you know it. But he says, I'll tell you what it means. It means that the universe is a very finite place. Everything is discrete. Everything has its own dimensions. Every created thing, space is divided into units. Time is divided into units. Not to get into all of the scientific literature on Planck length and Planck time, but the universe is a very finite place. There's a scale between the earth and the sun. We don't say that, the earth is infinite and the sun is infinite. No, there's dimensions to everything in the world. So the Alter Rebbe says that Hashem is unlimited and Hashem is infinite. And if Hashem would create a universe without the concept of Tzimtzum, without the concept of Sirufei Oisies, of mixing up just the Mamaris, the utterances with which He created the world, if everything would just be spoken into existence with the full magnitude of what Hashem is, then the universe would be a very different place from what we know. Everything would be nullified to Hashem, first off. But also the universe would be a very infinite place, which is very much not what it is. Hashem wanted a very finite place. In order to create the universe, what Hashem did is He restricted Himself, He contracted Himself, He contracted His infinitude to be able to create a finite universe, a universe that is full of finities. I don't know if that's a word, but I don't know what word to use. We need a universe that has all of the littleness that it does, all of the non-magnitude. And to that end, Hashem did retract his light to be able to create it. It's a relatively brief explanation, given all of the terms and Kabbalah that's going on at the end of chapter 7. But that being said, it is the general gist of it, and that concludes chapter 7. Chapter 8 is going to start an analysis of how this oneness of Hashem relates to Hashem, in a way of speaking. That is to say, that so far we've been focused on Hashem creating the universe, and how he's able to relate to us with everything in between, with not everything in between, because it's really all one. That's kind of the point of shiurim yichud v'amunah, the gate of oneness and belief. But we need to understand, vis-a-vis Hashem, how he has unity by himself. Not just how we're able to exist, even though Hashem is so great, but also what does it mean to say that Hashem has a will? What does it mean to say that Hashem has thought? So these are things that we're going to be discussing in chapter 8 and on a little bit more. So in chapter 8, the Alter Rebbe kind of starts a point which gets finished in chapter 9, or later chapters, but it almost like the sentence continues into chapter 9. But it's not that the Alter Rebbe asks a question that's answered in chapter 9. He lays out a lot of information, and it's useful information. So the Alter Rebbe says that the Rambam wrote that the essence and the existence of Hashem is all one. It's all one complete unity. There's no mixture. And that is to say that we have a lot of different names for Hashem. We say that Hashem is the merciful, he's the graceful, he is the kind one. All of these things, we say he's a chacham. Hashem has different desires. All of these things, these different attributes of Hashem, it's important to appreciate that they're all one by Hashem. The Alter Rebbe emphasizes that we're not able to properly understand this because, as stated before, when we say that we have a will, when we have a desire, when we're kind, when we're merciful, when we're graceful, whatever attribute we may have that we may be expressing, it's an expression of ourselves. It's not ourselves. It's something that, it's an expression. But at the same time, says the Alter Rebbe, we need to appreciate that there's distinctions between all of these levels, all of these terms that we're selling, all of these phrases that we're throwing out of being merciful and kind, or being wise, or having desires. So it says the Alter Rebbe, typically by people, we say that the highest thing is our intellect. And not just to say that it's the most special thing, but it's to say that our intellect is the first thing that expresses itself, that finds any form of expression. That is to say, for example, the Alter Rebbe gives an example of a small child, that small children want things. Big children also want things. Adults also want things. Maybe adults are big children, but people want things. And the smaller that a person is, the less developed the things that they want are. That is to say, that children perhaps know about ice cream. If their parents didn't realize that teaching them about ice cream at too young an age is a bad idea. But children want ice cream, and so they'll ask for ice cream, maybe incessantly. This is maybe coming from personal experience, but regardless, children don't understand the idea of, making enough money to pay rent, right? Adults have this great desire that they want to make enough money to pay rent. Unless they live in a house, in which case they'll have desires for Bugattis. The point is that as the intellect scales up, as the more you know, the more you've perceived already in the world, the more that's carved out in your brain of this is a cool thing to have, the more you want. So a kid wants ice cream because a kid doesn't know about the idea of wanting to have a house. They just live in a house. They don't appreciate the idea that, we need a roof over our head. Unfortunately, some children, they do know about that concept. If unfortunately their living situation is not up to par. But that being said, until they know about the concept, they don't want it. It's not something that's in their perception, even if they have it. And it especially applies for things that they don't know that they have, or that they don't know exist for them to want. If you don't know it exists, you can't want it. If you don't know it exists, you can't have feelings about it. Everything starts with our knowledge. What do we know? And then from what we know, we're able to start developing desires. We're able to start developing feelings. We're able to start developing attitudes toward them. But it requires that we know it. So the point of this is to say that to all of these things, there is some kind of scale. And when you take intellect is the top. It's the peak. It's what inspires everything else. Sometimes the intellect, like, I don't know, let's say the knowledge of an ice cream cone, something that exists in our brain, very snuggled and close to our essence, if you will, that we have our essence, which is expressed primarily, if you would say, in the brain, in the thoughts themselves. Thoughts are not being intellect, because thoughts are the expression of an idea. Intellect is the knowledge itself that resides in your brain. But regardless, things going on in your head are much loftier than the idea of then taking your 2 legs and walking over to the ice cream truck with its tantalizing music and buying an ice cream. They're 2 vastly different things, and you would definitely say that the idea of knowledge in your mind is much closer to your essence than the idea of walking, even though that walking is to the ice cream truck, or maybe even buying an ice cream, whatever it may be. So there's a very big difference of scale in how closely related the intellect is to you, more so than the action that may be inspired by it. And it's a difference of scale, of distance to your essence, in short. So this concludes chapter 8. With Hashem, we're going to discuss how this relates to Hashem, vis-a-vis Hashem, in chapter 9, and looking forward to doing that.